The Lord of the Rings continues, with the scene shifting away from Gaffer's confrontation with the miller. That very month was September, and as fine as you could ask. A day or two later, a rumor, probably started by the knowledgeable Sam, was spread about that there were going to be fireworks. Fireworks, what is more, such as had not been seen in the Shire for nigh on a century. Not indeed, since the old Took died. Once again, we have the comparison to the old Took being made, with Tolkien also doing a fine bit of funny characterization here. He has just introduced, in a manner of speaking, for the second time, the character he termed the principal hero, or something like that, of The Lord of the Rings, Samwise Gamgee. So the emphasis is placed once more on Bilbo and Sam, with the latter being associated with the former and with the Gaffers. This paragraph informs us of how Sam has loose lips and is something of a terrible gossip. This will be important later in the novel, and also gives us a good idea of Sam's involvement with the Baggins, the trust placed in him, and that he's the sort of person to get carried away by excitement. As to the detail about there not being fireworks for nigh on a century, it's a neat little nod to The Hobbit and to some of the local lore of the Shire, but that's all. That was Gandalf's mark, of course, and the old man was Gandalf the Wizard, whose fame in the Shire was due mainly to his skills with fire, smoke, and lights. His real business was far more difficult and dangerous, but the Shire folk knew nothing about it. To them he was just one of the attractions at the party, hence the excitement of the Hobbit children. "G for Gran," they shouted, and the old man smiled. They knew him by sight, though he only appeared in Hobbiton occasionally and never stopped long, but neither they nor any but the oldest of their elders had seen one of his fireworks display. They now belonged to a legendary past. This paragraph is one that comes after a descriptive one that describes how Gandalf imprinted each of his firecrackers with his signature G and some runes. Gandalf here is being talked up by the local children, and is evidently moved in that way that only a grandfatherly old man can be. His wise and kindly and appreciates what a gift children are to humanity. Their innocence and goodness is a treasure worth more than all the treasure and gold in all the world. When the old man, helped by Bilbo and some dwarves, had finished unloading, Bilbo gave a few pennies away, but not a single squib or cracker was forthcoming, to the disappointment of the onlookers. This part is interesting for how it does a lot of setup. Tolkien is setting up for the end of the chapter when Bilbo will leave with the dwarves. It's just background stuff here, but it is still important to work things into the background. This is one of the features I've noticed that sets Tolkien apart from most other writers of the genre. He always has people working in the background. He writes as though he were a painter. There is the stuff happening in the foreground while there are background events and people milling around. It gives not only a lived-in quality to his work, but also an element of vitality to his work. The lesson would, I would argue, be forgotten until the works of Tad Williams, who was to infuse this element into much of Dragonbone Chair, then forget about it for the end of the book until the start of To Green Angel Tower, then forget it again. It is an integral part of writing in such a genre, because it isn't simply enough to write about the great men of your history, but also to write the actions and movements and behaviors, habits and ideas of the smaller people, those who aren't the main focus of the story. History, after all, is more than just the study of extraordinary events and people. It is also the study of culture and the individuals on the ground level. It is their lives that serve as background to the larger events and peoples that take place. Take, for example, the likes of, say, Napoleon and his period. To most, this and the French Revolution are the most interesting things going on in his era in France and England. Oddly enough, I find the fact that Beethoven was moving about in Germany in the same period so much more interesting. Ludwig van Beethoven is so much more fascinating after all than Napoleon, with his endless supply of music, his 9 symphonies, his battles with deafness, and so on. The wars of the era arguably blur into one another, and the fact Napoleon lost adds to the lack of interest on my part. What do I care? What's more is that Dumas and Maquet wrote throughout the mid and later 19th century that is far greater interest to me than Napoleon or the goings-on of big events and figures of the age. That is history, just as the more popular stuff is going on. Is the study of Beethoven more important than Napoleon? Nope, absolutely not. Is the study of the Brothers Grimm, who also fascinates me, less important? Nope. All of these are baked into that era of history, just as Napoleon is to be found therein the central role of the era. This, you see, is how you ought to look at your world building and scene setting, because as everyone is eating during the party, for example, Bilbo takes to the center of the stage, even Frodo is chattering with Sam and Merry, while Gandalf in turn keeps a stern eye out for any tricks on the part of Bilbo.